glorious day.
All right, that's quite enough of that. It's time to talk about video games.
Now,
Quit your whining. Come now.
wait, what? It took my coffee. I don't know where that is. I have absolutely no idea. I thought I was getting the teleporting thing under control, but I guess not. Also, the universe is mad at me because I haven't talked about video games in a few days, so I'm gonna remedy that, I suppose. Hey, you! That's right, you. You like video games, don't you? Come on, don't try to hide it. You're with me. You can tell me anything. Here, I'll let you in on a little secret. I'm a big nerd too. I know, huge surprise there, right? Yeah, I have been for, well, pretty much my entire life at this point. I've mainly been nerding out over video games and film with sprinklings of TV here and there. I mean, hell, my channel is about video games, so that should speak volumes to my level of nerdiness? I don't know if there's another word for that. Now, of course, I, much like you, have my favorite genres scattered throughout video games as a whole, and my favorite standouts within those genres. Let's take the shooter genre, for instance. There are some masterpieces in that one, like Half-Life or BioShock. Masterful works not only in their respective genre, but for gaming in general as an art form. They're both so good that they've been the inspiration behind countless titles over the years. You could absolutely find games that were the reason both of those titles exist as well. Art is heavily fueled by inspiration, whether it be from the natural world or from other pieces that you've enjoyed. Inspiration makes the world go round, and I love playing games that wear that inspiration like a badge of honor, because honestly, they should, even if they don't reach the same height as the games it was taken from. And speaking of all this inspired content, I wanted to take a look at a game that was developed by a very small team that loved Half-Life 2 so much, they decided to make Half-Life 2 at home. Welcome to Industria.
Walter? You here? The hell? I'm so confused. I want answers.
I would like to start off really quick by saying that the Make Half-Life 2 at Home was not meant to be snarky or anything like that. There is clear inspiration pouring throughout this project, and I think it's fantastic. First and foremost, this game takes many notes from Half-Life 2, obviously. And I can see that there's plenty of BioShock in there, and dare I say, sprinklings of David Lynch's Eraserhead, and maybe a little bit of Control? Maybe? But if I call anything I see out in the wild Lynchian, I'd probably be beaten up by at least one person I know, so I'll continue to avoid that term. Anyway, Industria is a trip. A shorter one, to be sure, but it felt like a proof of concept for something much bigger and better to come down the line, so in that spirit, it's in no way insignificant. With that being said, though, what is Industria? Well, Industria is a first-person shooter that sees you traversing to a parallel world in order to give chase to a work colleague of yours that has disappeared under, shall we say, very odd circumstances, like real suspicious stuff. Our story begins in Cold War-era Berlin, just hours before the fall of the Berlin Wall. You receive a phone call that kicks off what is going to be, or what is shaping up to be, a pretty cool little adventure. Where will you go? What will you see? Well, be patient, I'm about to get to that. As you make your way to your place of work, you'll find many questions entering your mind. What the hell is going on? What's that sound? Where is everyone? There's no going back.
I'm coming for you, Walter. You can't leave me here.
At least, not that you can see. Once you step through the threshold between worlds, you find yourself in the now abandoned city of Hakovic, having just been saved by the city's last human resident. From there, you'll be faced with robotic enemies while you're drip-fed information over your radio by your savior-turned-guide in between the game's chapters. I fucking messed that up. And in between the game's chapters, you'll no doubt have more questions after being transported to a contrastless library that makes no attempt at giving our protagonist any new information. Will you be given all the answers to the questions you have by the end? Only time will tell. But probably not, though. I first learned about this game when a tweet came my way about its currently in development sequel. I was enamored by what I was seeing of the footage being shown for Industria 2. It looked so creepy. I was getting good vibes, something fierce, and it felt special. Right off the bat, I was treated to more of that style I saw from the sequel's footage. A surprisingly beautiful world for being a lower budget game. One that was seemingly paid for, at least in part, from an Epic Games grant. I mean, honestly, look at what low budget titles have the ability to look like now. Not saying that graphics are everything, as aesthetic and art direction overall are more important than fidelity alone, but I just wanted to note my surprise here. I mean, hell, I'm really not used to indie titles or lower budget titles having ray tracing options just yet. It's becoming more and more common, sure, it's just kind of surprising to see, at least for me to see. I was also very impressed with the story. Our main character, despite being a fish out of water, is a real ride or die kind of gal. She's going through stuff that would humble any one of us, and she's taken it rather well.
What the hell is happening here?
Jokes aside, the story is what really carried my interest the whole way through this shorter experience. I wanted to know more about Hakovic and Atlas and where the hell my goddamn husband is. The world of Industria is dense and leaves you practically needing to know just what the hell happened here. Why are there robots roaming empty streets where people used to live? What are all these massive cables for? Who the hell's the guy over the radio? What the fuck am I watching right now? I'd also like to mention the performances given by the game's actors. While said performances may not be industry-defining or anything, they still did a great job.
What do you see?
Well, a bed. A blanket.
I wanted to spotlight them specifically for a moment because with smaller games, performances really seem to go either way, and I was happy to see these ones go the correct direction. So Industria's one big chase through a city sitting squarely in a parallel reality. A reality that has plenty of history for you to learn about as you delve deeper and deeper into this hive of robotic treachery. Well written, pretty, decently acted, and has some killer tracks to boot. As per usual, I'll start with performance. It ran pretty well. I was getting well above the 144 FPS mark unless I turned on any ray tracing effects, in which case, even with my 4090, I see about 70 to 80 FPS. The game does look great without them though, so I'm certain you'd survive not using any of the ray tracing effects at all. I will say that there were your typical stutters here and there, as well as some odd visual artifacting on occasion, but neither happened often enough to take away any immersion. I did suffer one very large bug that made it impossible to progress, as I suddenly couldn't draw weapons, interact with doors, or pick up ammunition. I had to completely restart the game to fix the issue, and luckily this only happened once. It was actually super similar to the big bug I encountered the first time I played through Alone in the Dark, so it does make me wonder if it's just an Unreal issue? Who knows? Not this guy. Regardless, you're probably not going to have any issues running this game. Industria is, of course, a first-person shooter with lighter puzzle elements. I can safely say that the biggest part of this game, its shooting, feels great. It's clear care was taken in making sure it felt good first and foremost. You'll be finding new weapons every so often, and along the way you'll come across ammo and healing items to keep you restocked after your many bouts with the metal jerks that would seek to end your adventure. While not super prominent, there are at least a few puzzles scattered throughout. The game does certainly feature more combat than anything else though. You will also find a flashlight upon your arrival here that requires super frequent battery refreshments in order to stay bright. It won't die completely on you, but it will dim, and when you're not outside, you can't see shit without this thing. So Industria feels like a fairly competent shooter. It runs pretty well and does a decent enough job of keeping you engaged throughout your playthrough. But you already know, bitches gotta complain. While I certainly enjoyed this title, there are some nitpicks that I have here and there that kept me from fully falling in love with it. As I journeyed through Hakovic, there were some things that I bounced off of along the way, and I do mean nitpicks. As you've probably come to learn through watching these pseudo-reviews that I do, I always try to see small complaints as just that. Small. First up, I do feel as though the ammo carrying capacity is a little low. Not enough to ruin anything, but the game is a shooter, and it would be nice if the game supported maybe more defensive play in terms of being able to save up ammo for when you need it more. I know that this is not a starvation horror game where you need to do that sort of thing. It's just one of the ways that I like to play basically any game with guns. Apparently when the game released, you could carry a lot more as you went through the game, and they nerfed it for balancing. I get why, but it does put a damper on my experience. In games like this, I generally like to use my melee weapon in lower stakes encounters, and my guns when it becomes too much to handle or it's clear that I'm gonna need to. So that way, I don't get caught with my pants down and my mags empty. That leads me to another nitpick, which is that the melee weapon, your axe, doesn't feel very good to use outside of opening crates and unblocking doorways. It does a decent amount of damage, but the enemies have this really weird attack range where they don't even have to make any kind of contact with you to hurt you. And hurt you, they do. It makes for an unfortunate time if you're like me and want to use your melee as a way to prepare for emergencies instead of only in an emergency. I just don't feel it's a viable option. This game wants you to use your firearms, but also not too much, or at least it seems that way. Personally, I feel as though the ammo carrying limit should be upped like 50% more. I think it'd feel a lot better that way. Now, my final gripe is that the game feels a bit too dark at times. Yes, you have a flashlight, but if you haven't been wise with it or left it running too long in the wrong spot, you could have a much dimmer and crappier one to deal with. Things are just a bit too dark, at least from a gameplay standpoint. For like realism and getting your environment to really immerse you, I totally get it, but it just, I don't know, that was something I bounced off of a bit in terms of that mechanic anyway. I'm sure that some of you would also want me to mention one last thing. This game's about 3 hours long. I complained about South Park Snow Day being 5, so you might be thinking that it's a key complaint for me here. Well, you would be incorrect. This game was paid for, at least in part, via a grant. Small team, super tiny budget. Snow Day was a hugely different game that had a multi-billion-dollar publisher right up its ass. The publisher for Industria is a fraction the size of THQ Nordic. These are vastly different games with vastly different budgets, and one set expectations very differently. I understood, well and good, that this wasn't going to be a 10-hour experience, and there was no disappointment when the credits rolled in that regard. Where does that leave me overall? Industria is a compact love letter to one of the greatest shooters, hell, one of the greatest video games of all time. And while it may not be put up on a pillar of the same height as Half-Life 2, it's certainly worthy of being mentioned in the same conversation. Oh, you like Half-Life 2? Dude, you gotta check out Industria. It's a little shorter, but man, it's pretty decent. I would say, despite my gripes, I'm glad I bought it. It was an amuse-bouche to a sequel that I'm hoping will blow every bit of this title out of the water. It gave me a taste of what the team at Bleak Mill can do and what they want to do more than anything. And when that dinner service begins, I think it's gonna be a good meal. Okay, that's video game time for today. It didn't take my coffee. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed. Again, I'm having a pretty good time putting these together. I think I am getting a little bit better at this as time goes on, thankfully. I don't know, it's just a rarity for me to actually feel like I'm getting better at something, so I won't bore you with that right now. I will say, next video should be out within the next couple of weeks, and that's gonna be on one of my most anticipated games for the year, Crow Country, so make sure you keep an eye out for that one. I'm gonna teleport back up to the kitchen now because I was not done up there, so bye!